Now, we all know, Bob, that as a business, when the fight is big enough, you've worked with Don King, you've worked with De La Hoya, even Al Heyman. How do you make this happen?
Al Heyman, he refuses to allow any of his fighters to get beat by a top-ranked fighter. And if Terrence fights Errol Spence, there's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford. That's Terrence Crawford fights Errol Spence. There's one winner, and that's Terrence Crawford. And Al Heyman refuses to allow it.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay where we're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, and now it's time for our weekend recap. First up is the fight between former WBC welterweight champion Danny Garcia and seasoned veteran and a tough kid overall, Adrian Granados. Ahead of this fight, I had questions about what Danny Garcia really wants at this stage in his career. I had questions about whether or not Danny still has fire in his belly. Can he still compete and contend at the level at which he's been competing? Because in Adrian Granados, what you have is a seasoned kid who's been around the block and who isn't afraid to make things ugly. You know, Adrian Granados, he's a pressure fighter, and Danny Garcia, he's a boxer puncher. So ahead of the fight, I figured if anybody's got the stylistic advantage here, it is Danny. The only question left, the only intangible, is what does he want out of what's left of his career? And you know, I saw him at the weigh-in, and Danny looked gone. Danny looked drained. So there were question marks there. Now, I will say that I did pick Danny Garcia to win the fight. And for those interested in seeing that video, I'll leave the link to it in the description box. I did pick Danny Garcia to win the fight, but I questioned if he does win, how good is he going to look in doing so? And I'll say that Danny Garcia looked good out there. He looked like he can still more or less compete at the level at which he's been competing. Because Adrian Granados had little to offer. And that has a lot to do with the fact that he's a pressure fighter squaring off against a boxer-puncher. For anyone familiar with those two base styles, boxer-puncher versus pressure fighter, the reason that boxer-puncher has a stylistic advantage is because that boxer-puncher can use that pressure fighter's aggression against him by implementing the counter-punching, by alternating, knowing when to engage and when not to, and doing it fluidly as to not get sucked into a war. Rather, be the guy who's going out there and showing the cleaner, clearer, sharper punches and the better boxing overall. And that's what Danny Garcia did, more or less. I mean, he was hitting Adrian Granados with some real heavy leather. Big left hooks, big right hands. Adrian Granados hit the deck 3 times. And that's as a result of being the aggressive guy, of being the aggressor who's going to constantly try to stand in front of the other guy and apply that pressure, assert himself,
impose his will,
and, you know, fight the kind of fight that he wants to fight. The problem with that is, against a boxer puncher, that's the wrong approach to take. Your best bet, and the best approach overall when being faced with a boxer puncher that can alternate between the two, your best bet is to slow the fight down and force that boxer puncher to play a game of chess. Something along the lines of a pure boxer, which Adrian Granados is not. Adrian Granados, he's a virtuous kid. He's got a lot of gameness, a lot of toughness, and maybe he's too tough for his own good. But ahead of this fight with Danny Garcia, I figured that, you know, Adrian's not going to all of a sudden start being a different guy. You know, he's going to keep being the guy that he's been. You know, he's a fighter that stays in character, which is true among many pressure fighters. That you really want to impose your will on the other guy. But Danny Garcia, being a boxer puncher, and also happening to be the more concussive puncher of the two, Adrian Granados, he just didn't have it. He didn't have what it takes, not for this fight. He's not all of a sudden, for example, going to become economic and look to work off the counter while employing lateral movement, pick his spots, take his time. He's not going to be that kind of fighter. But that's the kind of fighter, or that's more or less the kind of implementation that he would have had to use. He would have had to integrate that into his overall game plan to have a chance against Danny Garcia. But Adrian's not that kind of guy. He's a pressure fighter, and he stayed in character as pressure fighters often do. That they've got a lot of toughness, they got a lot of come forwardness, and they even make for some really entertaining fights. But at times, when they're matched against these boxer punchers that alternate between the two, what happened to Adrian happens to a lot of guys. That, you know, you might want to impose your will on that guy, but what you really need to do is take your foot off the gas. There were a few things working against Adrian Granados in this fight with Danny Garcia. One is the stylistic disadvantage, which I just talked about, and two
It's physicality.
are some of the physical attributes. You know, Danny Garcia, he's actually got great punch resistance, and it just so happens that Adrian Granados is not a particularly concussive puncher. So you wanting to rush in there and mix it up with this guy, that's just a bad idea overall, because even if you do, odds are he can take what you've got, but can you take what he's got? So you're going up against a guy with a stylistic advantage who can take your best shots and likely can floor you with his. It just, you know, it looked like what it looked like, and that's what it was. Now I'll say that Danny Garcia, he did look good out there, and credit to him, he did look good out there. He still looked like he's more or less one of the elite guys in the welterweight division, that in spite of certain question marks that tend to hang over his head as far as his enthusiasm and his ambitions, does he still really want to prove that he's one of the best guys there? Because Danny Garcia is often associated with just those kinds of questions. That all those things aside, he still looks like one of the elites in the 147-pound division.
Yeah, he does.
But in spite of looking good, let's not kid ourselves. This is Adrian Granados that he beat. This is Adrian Granados that he went out there and looked good against. A kid with a style that is made to order for Danny Garcia. And that's saying that yesterday's performance does not convince me that Danny Garcia could go into a rematch with Keith or a rematch with Sean and do any better than he did in the first fights. That I'm not completely sure what they have in mind for Danny. You know, I mean, what's he really gonna do? You know, Sean Porter's name is being rumored to be attached to Errol Spence's, and Keith Thurman's name is rumored to being attached to Manny Pacquiao's. And if all those rumors check out, where does that leave Danny Garcia? Because Danny Garcia issued out a call-out. He said certain names post-fight.
Like I said before, I want Manny Pacquiao said he wants to fight me. I'm open to fight him. Keith Thurman, Sean Porter, or Errol Spence. Any of them top names. I definitely want to avenge my loss of Porter and Thurman. You know, I gave them the opportunity. They got to give me the opportunity.
But the only other world champion in the weight class just so happens to be the guy that he didn't mention, Terrence Crawford. So if Keith ends up booked, and Errol ends up booked, and Sean ends up booked, where does that leave Danny Garcia? Who's he going to be fighting? I can only imagine that maybe, I don't know, they'd orchestrate a fight between him and Omar Figueroa.
Sergey Lipinets.
You know, maybe something like that. But that's not a world title fight, you understand. That's why there are questions in regards to Danny Garcia, because there is a world champion out there that you could fight, but you don't seem to be showing any kind of enthusiasm in regards to fighting him. So, you know, I don't know what they're going to have Danny Garcia doing if those rumors check out. If Sean fights Errol and Keith fights Manny, I don't know what they're going to have Danny Garcia doing. The most I can say is he looked good yesterday. He won the fight, but I did expect him to win the fight, you understand. I did expect that, and I'm sure you guys did too. So it's a mixed bag, and what I'm left with are mixed feelings. Nice showing in what was a keep busy fight. And now we move on to a matchup that I viewed as being a bit anticlimactic before the fight, and just so happened to have ended in a very anticlimactic way. Talking about the Terrence Crawford versus Amir Khan WBO title fight. Let's talk about what we saw for a second. You know, from the opening bell, that just that first round, that pretty much characterized the entirety of the fight. Understand that these two guys are in very different stages of their careers. Terrence Crawford goes out there, and even though he's the champion, he fights like he's the challenger. He has all the poise, all the control, all the skill of a champion, but has the mean streak and ferocity of a challenger. Whereas Amir Khan, he's not trying to make a statement. I mean, not based on what I saw. And if he took up this fight, it was only because it was an alternative to a Kell Brook fight. A fight that he's worked very hard year after year to get away from. To put distance between himself and that fight any way that he can. And I'll tell you the truth. I didn't have very many thoughts ahead of the fight. And now that the fight has come and gone, I don't have very many thoughts after it. I mean, the only talking point that is of some mild interest is how the fight ended and how some people are saying that, you know, Terrence Crawford, he hit the guy low and that's why he wasn't able to continue, yada, yada, yada. Let's talk about that, you know. When that exchange first took place, Terrence Crawford had fired off a shot and Amir Khan's forearm ended up behind Terrence Crawford's head, pushing him down. And as that occurred, the shot's trajectory had changed, and it ended up landing lower,
than intended,
making contact lower than where Terrence Crawford intended for the punch to land. It very much appeared like Terrence Crawford was targeting Amir Khan's midsection, but as a result of that forearm pushing him down, the punch itself sailed, and it ended up landing in what looked like Amir Khan's upper leg and or hip. I'll say this much about the shot. It was definitely low, it was definitely below the belt, but it didn't appear to me to be a deliberate low blow. A low blow intended to, hurt the guy, take something out of the guy. I don't think that's what Terrence Crawford intended to do. It looked like he was targeting his midsection, but the punch sailed. And that can happen when two guys are in the midst of an exchange and they're in such close proximity to each other. A punch may end up sailing as a result of what the other guy is doing. That the punch might have been intended to go one place, but it ends up in another. But it's a result of what the other guy was doing. Guy might be moving a certain way, punch goes below the belt. Guy might, be moving his head or his torso a certain way, so a punch sails behind or around the back of his head. These things happen. I don't think that was an intentional low blow, because this was a fight that Terrence Crawford was clearly winning, and Amir Khan appeared to be the man who was very much in trouble. Thus, there's no necessity to hit this guy low to slow him down. Terrence Crawford was very much doing the business out there.
He was in control.
But as a result of this low blow, there are questions. There are questions in regards to Terrence deliberately hitting him low, and there are questions
Did Amir quit?
in regards to Amir Khan using this as an avenue to get out of the fight. That Amir Khan, after a couple of rounds, he really didn't want to be there anymore. He saw what direction the fight was going, and he used this as an opportunity to find a way out of the fight. Essentially, he was hamming it up for the ref, and he was looking for a way out. To that, I'll say this. We all saw the same thing, we all saw the same fight, and it's up to you what you want to feel about it. But if you want my opinion, and you're here so I'll assume that you do, yes, I do feel that Amir Khan was looking for a way out. I do feel that Amir Khan knew what was about to happen, and he saw no reason to go on any further. So at the first opportunity that arose for him to get out of this thing,
he decided to ham it up.
That's what he did, in a manner of speaking. I mean, just the act of Virgil Hunter continuously asking him if he wants to go on characterizes the overall dynamic of the fight. That this is a fight that Amir Khan is not going to win. You are not going to rally back and pile up the points. It's not going to happen. Amir Khan was in trouble from the opening bell from the first knockdown. So use your heads, kids. At some point, common sense has got to come into it. That yes, we're looking at the same thing, and there are varying interpretations of what we're looking at, but what's more likely than not is that Amir Khan wanted a way out of a fight that he is clearly losing. There's no need to have illusions about this thing. I didn't have any illusions about the fight beforehand, and I don't have any
about it now.
Illusions about it now. Amir Khan, he wanted a way out. The only reason he took this fight was so that he wouldn't have to fight Brook, to absolve himself of the pressure to face his longtime rival. And when you take a fight like this on, against a fighter like this, when you take a fight like this on, under those circumstances, that denotes your mental space. That denotes where your head is at. You're not coming to win. You didn't come here to win. What you came here to do is to get away from that guy.
Get away from Brook.
But now that you're here, you've been knocked down, you're getting hit clean, you're taking punishment. You've been through the ringer a couple of times already in your career. You understand? In this situation, for Amir Khan, it seems more likely than not, to me, that he saw no reason to go on, thus he hammed it up for the ref so he could go home early. You look at still images of the punch from Terrence Crawford actually making contact with Amir Khan, and it appears to have hit him on the leg, or at least the upper portion of his leg and or his hip. It doesn't appear to have hit him on the groin, I mean, I don't know, unless Amir Khan's groin is located in a different part of his body than mine or yours. Your guess is as good as mine, but it doesn't look like a groin shot. Looks like he got hit on the upper portion of his leg. Now, for argument's sake, I'll say, even if he didn't get hit right on the groin, right? The shot was still below the belt, and maybe the shot still hurt enough that it did hamper his ability to go on. For argument's sake, let's entertain that.
Okay.
To that, I will say this. The overall damage that Amir Khan sustained in this fight was not limited to that groin shot, and it's not like he was winning the fight up until that point. This is a guy that's clearly losing, clearly getting tagged. He already got dropped in the first round, so the idea that the fight itself and its overall outcome
Leading up to it,
was determined by this singular moment.
that's bullshit.
I'm sorry, but I can't buy into that. What I think is that, this guy was taking a lot of punishment. He knows what's coming, and he just wants to get out of there. And he's using this as an avenue to get out of there. That's what I think. That's my take on how the fight ended. And that Amir Khan, even taking this fight, had less to do with Terrence Crawford and trying to defeat Terrence Crawford. It had less to do with Crawford and more to do with getting away from Brook. That essentially he took the fight for all the wrong reasons. That in reality, he didn't want to be there. He just didn't want to have to deal with Brook. So he chose what to him was the lesser of two evils. But you go out there, it's the opening round, you get knocked on your ass, and that affects your demeanor from that moment on, from there on out. That now, you done been put on your ass already in the first round. And you're not offering up an equal and opposing offense. That blistering hand speed, it's doing very little for you in this situation. Seems to me that he was just looking for an exit strategy. That's all it really was. And with this fight working out the way that it did, the aesthetic of it, I think it's safe to say that whatever interest there still was in seeing Amir Khan fight Kell Brook, I think whatever interest there was left in that has all but dissipated, because even Kell Brook himself is saying that the Khan fight is dead and he very much means to fight Terrence Crawford. I think he's got his head in the right place. I mean, it's true. Why chase around that guy? Given what he just put on display, why continue to chase around that guy?
He don't want it.
Why not fight Terrence Crawford? I'm sure his dance card is free, given that the people that he does want to fight, or at least one guy in particular, he doesn't seem to be too interested. So Terrence Crawford might actually take up Kell Brook on his challenge. And I can see that fight being made. I can see that happening. Because that would be yet another matchroom fighter against another top-ranked fighter. Bob Arum, Eddie Hearn, there have been exchanges of words. There have been things that have been said. But at the end of the day, they still have an amicable enough relationship that I can see that fight happening. So my thoughts on this fight overall, I told you guys, I thought it was anticlimactic from the get-go, and it ended in an anticlimactic way that I never thought for a second that Amir Khan is really coming here to do the business. What I figured is, it's probably going to take Crawford 2-3 rounds to figure this guy out and get in a groove, and once he does, it's going to be one-sided from there on out. And if anything, Crawford exceeded my expectations because he was dominating the guy from the opening bell. It seems like he came into the ring already in his groove. So it is what it is.